reserve lands as it is right now. Oh, maybe we should go back just for a second. And the other point about this, because I put these pictures here for a reason, to remind me about what's really going on here. There are certain people that stand to get incredibly wealthy off the fact that the majority of our water and sanitation systems need to be fixed. It's not going to be First Nations. You'll remember Bruce Clark and his other conservative pals who set up a water company who are going to make billions of dollars off of fixing our water systems. Not from our money, of course. Or sorry, not that we would get any of that benefit. And he has ties to Harper. So who's really getting the benefit off of our poverty? People talk about there's an industry around First Nations poverty. Well, the biggest industry is government. It's a $5 billion industry, and if you add water and sewer and our lack of housing to that, it's going to be a $10 billion, $20 billion industry. There's people that make money. It's a myth that there is not enough money for First Nations in this country. Canada's rich off of our lands and resources, and they're going to get richer off of our poverty, and that's what this bill is about. Okay, Bill C-45. I don't know if any of you are familiar with omnibus bills, but it's when governments take a big, giant bunch of amendments to, say, 70 or 80 pieces of legislation and put it all in one great big bill. Well, that's what they're doing with C-45. Because what it does is it prevents any debate. It prevents Grand Chief or anybody else from going and presenting views or requests for amendments. And this one in particular included Indian Act changes without even consulting with us. It was a complete surprise. They just came up and said, what we're going to do is we're going to lower the threshold for surrendering lands on reserves, because it's too hard to get you Indians to surrender your lands, right? We've kind of been resisting that for a few hundred years. Well, they're trying to find ways to make it easier, and one of the ways in which they're going to do that is make it so that minister will call a meeting, ask you to surrender your reserve lands, and whoever shows up, let's just say these 5 people, if 3 of them vote yes, it's surrendered. It doesn't even have to be approved by cabinet anymore, the minister gets to approve it. In the old days, like now, you used to have a majority of all of your members agree to surrender. Now, it can literally be a handful of people, whether your band is 500 members or 26,000 members. And the minister can expedite it. That's what's in Bill C-45, and we don't even get to make a submission on it because it's an omnibus bill. And I already talked about the Navigable Waters Act a little bit, but what the feds are trying to do with that, even though it doesn't mention First Nations, is they're trying to vacate their jurisdiction. And what that means is, wherever the federal government has jurisdiction over federal lands, parks, waters, fisheries, that kind of thing, they have a duty to consult, they have to talk to us about Aboriginal treaty rights, they can't do anything without talking to us first. By vacating that jurisdiction and saying, no, it's all provincial jurisdiction, they're washing their hands completely of all of our treaty rights, knowing that the provinces are free to do what it is that they want. But worse than this, provinces have a duty to consult as well, they just don't mean it very well. It allows provinces to have much more powerful expropriation powers and powers to decide the fate of individual First Nations across the country, even within a treaty territory, which is different than if it was on a federal level. So this is what Bill C-45 is doing, but we know what the ultimate objective is. Why on earth are they making it easier to surrender our Indian lands? Harper government calls that unlocking our lands for the maximized benefit of Canadians, and we have to keep that in mind. Here's the stuff that's going to be introduced, and part of what it is that we have been rallying against across the country, trying to inform community members, is the First Nation Education Act. There's a problem in First Nation education, and the #1 problem is that it's chronically underfunded. even in comparison to provincial residents, chronically underfunded. That's the problem. But because that's the problem, they have to deflect the issue and say, that's not the problem. The problem is we need a whole bunch more legislation. So the federal government can take our treaty right and nationalize it, legislate it, and control it. That's definitely not in the treaties anywhere. Nowhere did we agree to any of this. But the other thing it does is that it incorporates provincial laws into First Nation education on reserve. That is also a violation of our treaty right to education. And they're vacating their jurisdiction. Because vacating their jurisdiction isn't just stepping away from their treaty obligations, it's also stepping away from the funding obligations. You want to go to post-secondary? Go apply for a provincial student loan. That's the vision of the future, unless we say no to the First Nation Education Act. Some of this legislation, they say it will be optional, and that's an illusion. They're very good at optical illusions. This will not be optional. The way the Conservatives work is when they have a piece of legislation on the table, that's the only game in town. So they present us constantly with a false choice. Assimilate or integrate. If you don't like First Nation schools now, you don't like that it's underfunded, good, go to provincial schools. Those are your only two options, completely ignoring treaty rights. What they didn't expect was for First Nations across the country to say, you can take that act, and I won't finish the rest. But you can take that act and take it right back with you on your little boat as you go back to where you came from. But this is absolutely critical. Once they legislate your treaty right, they will say it's well out of Section 35. And you don't get to undo it. That's why action is important now. Here's the worst one of all, in my opinion, and this is just my opinion. I'm not here to tell you what to think, I'm just giving you my legal analysis of it, because this is what I read 24 hours a day. The First Nation Property Ownership Act is a misnomer. It's not about that at all. This is the Dawes Act in Canadian form. What they are going to try to do is take communally held reserve lands, divide them up into individual parcels, so you get a piece, you get a piece, you get a piece, and they can be sold to non-Indians and corporations, like any other piece of provincial lands. They will be under provincial registries, provincial laws. There will be no Aboriginal and treaty rights associated with those lands. Now, the people who are promoting this, like Manny Jules of the First Nations Tax Commission, he says, you've got nothing to worry about. Even if all the people in the community sell their lands because they're too poor and they can't afford school and they want to send their kids to university, don't worry. The band will still have all of the underlying title. So envision this, a band office in a sea of non-Indian people. Who is the band governing? So they get to manage some non-Indian people. Big deal. Right? The objective of this bill is to destroy our communities and destroy our governments. That's why they introduced it in the United States, and that's why they're introducing it here. But here's the thing about what happened in the United States. It wasn't just reserve lands that were up for grabs. They took 90 million, 90 million acres of treaty lands. So lands that were locked down in treaties and could never be taken. They just took them. That's what that kind of legislation can do. Within 2 generations, they made 90,000 First Nations people in the United States homeless on their own territories. That's exactly what they're proposing to happen here. And here's the other myth. They say that this will be for the benefit of individual First Nations peoples. Maybe so initially, whatever you get to sell your lands for. But what happened with the Dawes Act is once they passed the act, they just kept passing amendments to make it progressively worse. So the Dawes Act was sold, this will help individual Indians. You can sell your land and make money. But then after a while, they stopped giving those lands to individual Indians, and they gave over half of it to governments, militaries, and corporations to do resource extraction. Tell me when you think of the words Kinder Morgan, Enbridge, tar sands, Ring of Fire, that doesn't come to mind. How easy would it be, and let's just pick Samson Cree. If the pipeline wanted to go right through Samson Cree, you don't even have to negotiate with the chief and council anymore. You don't have to get a community referendum. You just have to pay a high enough price for those 10 people that are on the pipeline. That's it. It's the easiest way to circumvent the duty to consult and accommodate Aboriginal and treaty rights. And what they're doing is they're making it sound like this underlying title that the band will get is what will save us. But here's the deal. Here's how you get into the First Nation Property Ownership Act. You'll never guess what you have to do with your reserve lands. You must absolutely, unconditionally surrender your entire reserve and all the rights attached to it, Aboriginal title, treaty rights, Aboriginal rights, sovereignty, everything. You give that all to the Crown, Canada, and then Canada gives you back federal title. Who the hell wants federal title? It's fictional title. Canada's sovereignty isn't even legitimate compared to our sovereignty. But the thing about getting the federal... The thing about getting federal title is all your rights are lost to it. You get a title that's third in line, because the first title in this country is First Nation title, right? Then the fake title is the Queen's title. She just came here and said, I have title here. The third title goes to the federal and provincial governments. So the federal crown doesn't even have complete title. It's subject to the Queen's title. Why on earth would we go from first title to fourth title? Not gonna do it. Not gonna do it. Okay, next one. So here's the big picture, because it's a lot of legislation to go through, so you might have to go through. Right now, politically, we have a majority conservative government in the House and in the Senate. The way legislation is passed is it has to be passed in the House and passed in the Senate. But that doesn't matter. They're a majority in both. They have the power to pass whatever it is they want, whether we like it or not. And we have a weak national First Nations political presence. And I'm not just saying that because I should have won the election. What I'm saying is that regardless of who is at the top, it's not about that person. It's about what they're doing to stand up to defend our rights. And if we have a weak national political presence, it allows this bulldozer to keep going. So that puts it all back on our shoulders. And to be quite honest, it always was on our shoulders. AFN doesn't hold treaty rights. Those are our treaty rights. AFN's not a government, we are governments. And if we don't like what's happening, that's on us to change it. We also have increasing legislative control, not less. We have a transfer of liabilities. We're going to get all the liabilities and no funding, and they get to exercise all the jurisdiction. We have increasing poverty. And this is what people don't get, Canadians don't get. They say, well, look it, you guys are going to school now. What wonderful improvements. You have books, you drink Pepsi, you have cell phones. You're all doing really, really well. But if you look at the statistics over the last 20 years, and not in little 5-block increments, all of our socioeconomic statistics about our health, our lifespan, our happiness, our mental well-being, is all getting progressively worse. We went from having 7 years less of a lifespan to 20 years less of a lifespan. We went from having teenagers committing suicide to little girls 8 years old committing suicide. Something is wrong with this picture.